Hello,
So,
everybody. My name is Leonard Paul. I run the School of Video Game Audio, and today we're joined by Katie Tarrant, who's been gracious enough to join us over from the UK. And basically, these sessions are just a great way for folks to dive in and ask, industry game audio leaders all their burning game audio questions in real time and get some great answers back and hopefully have some fun in the process too. So feel free to ask questions on the YouTube chat. I have basically, I'm able to see it over there. You can't see it, but it's over there. And so, what we'll do first is that Katie will give a small introduction on herself, and then we'll just start in with questions after that. So, yes, please. Thanks for joining us.
sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. Yeah, and thank you for having me on. Yeah, so my name's Katie. I am a senior sound designer at Rare currently, and I started there as an audio intern about 5.5 years ago now, after graduating from university. I did a music degree, although I didn't really learn a huge amount on my degree that I actually apply in my daily practice now. So that was kind of initially where I discovered that I enjoy composing, and I found the audio internship afterwards. But as in my title, my daily role is more sound design now. Still do a tiny bit of music, maybe here and there, but I would say 95% of my role is sound design now. So yeah, coming up on 6 years with Rare, it's been a great time.
Wow, nice. I guess my first question would be like, how, like, did you start with game audio doing like music type stuff, or was it more programming or from another discipline?
Definitely more music based. So as I said, I did a degree in music, which was largely playing in bands and sort of just learning how to be a self-employed musician. But I did a composing module on that university degree in my second year and kind of discovered composing for film, which I really enjoyed. But I noticed that in my spare time, I was always playing games, always listening to game soundtracks, and I kind of thought, well, why couldn't I compose for games instead? So I started kind of reaching out to small indie developers and friends of mine that I knew were interested in games and game development, other university student courses and things like that, and just putting together a portfolio essentially of my music and trying to work on game jams, small projects and stuff like that for the game side experience. And I just kind of really fell in love with it. And after I graduated, I saw the audio internship opportunity at Rare. By that point, I had a portfolio together of my music and some examples of some of the small game projects that I'd done. So I applied for that, and yeah, was fortunate enough to get that audio internship. But one part of my interview process with them was that I did also explain that I was interested in sound design, but I'd not really dabbled in it that much, and they were immediately just super receptive to that and keen for me to just learn and explore whatever I wanted to learn and explore essentially on that internship. So from the get-go, it was always you can focus more on music if you want, but if you're interested in sound design, we'll support that as well. And throughout the course of the internship, I just really found myself gravitating more towards sound design, which I didn't expect. And that's just kind of the avenue that I've gone down since. And more recently, going in more of a technical direction as well. So I do more programming now. I'm going in more of a technical and programming sound design direction. With still, the nice thing about Rare is I have complete freedom to do bits of creative sound design, bits of technical sound design, and they kind of just support and give me full sort of autonomy with that, which is fantastic.
Wow, that's it's pretty fortunate to be able to start out in music in games. It's it's kind of like the holy grail for those of us that are composers and musicians. The reason why I was curious is that in my own background, I had a music degree, but combined with a comp sci degree. So when I started, I did, well, initially I did QA, but same thing. I did an internship and got into the
Mm.
programming side, and then I kind of like eventually weaseled my way more into the content side. So it's
Yeah,
interesting
sure.
to see how, everybody has their own like different paths, sort of, with what their interests are and talents are, and then what they're able to match up with the actual company itself. And I guess Well, we do have an initial question specifically on that. Was there a lot of competition for the internship? And I guess the follow-up question is, like, did you hear back from the company as far as like, why you were able to get in sort of in the at the beginning?
Sure, yeah, it definitely was competitive. I can't remember how many other people applied, but it was probably upwards of at least 100, and
Wow.
nowadays it's several hundred. So that has, in the 5.5 years since I was an intern, the amount of applications they get has also grown as well. There's just a growing appetite for people to get into games. So I think that's always just going to continue to grow, especially now we have more universities offering courses for sound design and music and games. So then you end up with more graduates that are also interested in it. So yeah, I think that will continue to grow. In terms of me getting the role, it's hard to say really. I
Yeah.
mean, we've kind of chatted about it now and again, sort of my team and I and my boss and I. But from my understanding, it was just my portfolio was good and had a nice variety of music for them to listen to. It showed that I was kind of just really keen and showed the aptitude and just the initiative to for what I'd done so far in terms of the small projects I've worked on, the small amount of experience I've been able to build for myself. The fact that I had a website, my CV was professional, my portfolio was all kind of professional, and those kinds of things. And I think beyond that, I do see that a lot. Like in the intern applications we've had since then, a lot of people still also meet those criteria. So I think beyond that, it was just the interview stage because several of us got
Yeah.
invited to interview. But I felt like I immediately had a good relationship with my boss and our music director. They were the people that I did my interview with. I got on with them well, kind of in my first interview stage. Um, and yeah, we kind of just had a really good chat, and then that led to my second interview, which also went well. So I think it's kind of obviously you have to get your foot into the interview stage. Essentially, you have to have the checklist of a portfolio that represents your best work. Ideally, a website where your contact information is, a CV, and also ideally a cover letter that explains why you're interested in the role and the company, etc. They're the kinds of things that will initially get your application looked at. But beyond that, getting to the interview stage, if the quality of your work is good enough, then it's kind of just for me about being yourself, trying to be authentic, be friendly, be open, be honest with all of your answers to any questions that you get and things like that. It was the nice thing about Rare was it was always really informal. It was never high pressure. It was kind of just about having a conversation and them getting to know me. So that was just the whole way through was a really nice experience.
Great to hear. Are you involved at all on the flip side of it now that are you going through applicants that are interns?
Not for, unfortunately, we haven't taken on an intern for the past couple of years because of COVID. But we
Right.
are hoping to take someone on next year. So if we do, then applications would actually be opening sort of within the next month or so. And then when we take on a successful applicant, they tend to start around July, so in the summer.
Mm.
The internship lasts for 12 months as well, so it's a long period
Wow.
of time. You're not just with us for a couple of months. That is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
really solid amount of time for us to get to know you, help you learn, help you grow. And so far, we've taken on all but one of our interns, and the other intern that we didn't take on just immediately went on to another company as well. So the actual kind of track record of once we take someone on, we do our best to work with them, and either they continue to work with us or they have the experience necessary to go and work with another company straight afterwards.
Wow.
So it was a great internship in terms of the amount I learned and the amount of time that I had with Rare to learn and grow. So
Yeah, yeah, I highly recommend for, the students at the school that I work with to basically look for, possibilities of working with game jams, building up your portfolio. Obviously, the school, as it were, is focused on creating a demo reel and presenting yourself as sort of clearly as possible for different companies. And the idea being is that you just want your work to sort of, basically speak for itself. And then when you get to that interview stage, then then it's obviously your personality and your skills, your interpersonal skills there that will so hopefully sort of see you through. But it's an amazing yeah, like track record as far as like bringing in people and making sure that, like, because sometimes, one, I guess after you've gone through like hundreds of applicants, you've sort of, found probably a fairly good, match after that length of time. But it is pretty amazing to be able to have a company that progresses to that sort of hiring stage from the internship stage, because sometimes companies that are maybe larger, they sort of have a lot of interns, but then those interns, they
Mm,
can't necessarily bring them on, they just go on to the next batch. So it's nice to hear that Rare
absolutely.
has such a deep involvement and, like, um, you know basically investment with their interns.
Yeah.
It's great to hear.
Yeah,
um,
it has been nice, and it's nice to see more companies offering audio internships as well. And I think obviously we can't grow exponentially. There will reach a point where if our team size stays as it is, that we can't continue to take on interns, but we can certainly still do our best to give them the education and the foundation that they need to go and work with another company afterwards. So I still highly recommend it to look for internships where possible, because sometimes with people that might reach out for feedback or a bit of mentorship. Um, a lot of internships, at least with the Rare one, we will look for an applicant who already has some experience, not in the industry, but just the experience of having written music, having done sound design, for example. To actually show that you've already kind of done what you can to teach yourself about the craft. Um, but in terms of kind of what we would then go on, like if we take someone on, like I think it's useful to be able to have an internship as a way in,
hmm,
because for some people, they're at a point where they qualify for an internship and they would really benefit from that training, but they might not yet be at a point where they qualify for a junior role, for example. So
right.
it's a really nice, not necessarily interim, but I suppose kind of a bridge, like for some people that they might be able to do the internship and then move on to a junior role afterwards, if they're not able to get their foot in the door with a junior role in the first place, if that makes sense. So I
Yeah.
would love to just see as many companies as possible offering internships, really, because it's valuable. And although Rare started with me having an audio intern, they've now got a senior sound designer who hopefully continues to grow with them as well. So it's not just a case of taking on an intern that then kind of goes off to another company. Like for us, they've brought on someone that's now a full-time member of their team that continues to work with them and grow with them. So that's been really nice. Hopefully for that, as nice for them as it has been for me as well. So
Yeah, no, that's awesome. The couple of questions that we have that are sort of related to the internship is that there's a technical one just asking. That's a short answer. Are the internships only available to people in the UK, or is it possible to do remote, or what's the situation there?
yeah, I think unfortunately we are namely looking at UK applicants as it stands, but I can't confirm or deny that. So I would say to still look and look at the actual job description when it goes up, because we should specify that on the job page, I believe. But if it's still not clear there, then to also get in touch and just ask, because ultimately it's not my decision where we take our applicants from, or applications from, should I say. So it's still worth asking the question. But ultimately, our intention with taking on an intern would be someone that could come into the studio with us. And that's part of the reason why we couldn't take anyone on over the COVID pandemic, because
Yeah.
we weren't on site, we were all working from home. And ultimately, when you want to be with someone and train someone and even just reviewing and listening to audio in the same room, that's also, you can't do that sort of in those circumstances. So we're
Right.
hoping to all be able to go into the studio and actually support someone face to face, and hopefully take someone on in that kind of setting next year. So ultimately, if we do that, it would involve relocation from wherever you live. So I would imagine that we are looking more UK based for those reasons. But I can't confirm for sure. So I would say always find out directly from the company if you can.
Yeah. I guess a quick question also. Rare, the exact location is where in the UK?
So it's near Twycross, or in Twycross, should I say? It's
Hmm.
sort of in the Midlands of the UK. It is in the middle of nowhere. We have a really good kind of support network, for if people do relocate. Then there's lots of kind of nearby places to live and to stay. Whenever we take on interns, we tend to take on a group of interns. So sometimes they end up house sharing together. We obviously also get relocation support from our company in terms of helping you find somewhere to stay and kind of giving you all the information you need about the local area, about available carpools or people that you can travel in with and stuff like that. So yeah, we do provide all of that support. And again, it's there. I would imagine by next year we would still be in a hybrid setting. So there would potentially still be the opportunity for someone to work part-time remotely.
Yeah.
But as I said before, the whole benefit of the internship is to be able to spend time with someone sort of in the studio. So yeah, I mean, I live about 20 minutes from work. It's not too
Yep.
far away. And the majority of people kind of live sort of within short driving distance of the studio, with some exceptions of people that now work remotely. So yeah, it's in the middle of nowhere, but it's accessible enough, and there's plenty of carpools going to get there. And you get the added benefits of it being sort of in a beautiful environment with, you know, kind of rolling fields, and the actual kind of space that you have at Rare is really nice. They've put in a lot more walking paths and stuff like that. So yeah, it's you go into work, but you're also attached to this whole section of gorgeous nature, which is really nice.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I did a bit of uni over in Norwich at the University of East Anglia, which is sort of on the Wash
Yeah,
on the east side. And so, yeah, I really
it's cool.
enjoyed biking around there. It was a really beautiful country. I know that technically this might not be the case for Rare, but for Canada, and I've heard also in other internships, is that sometimes technically the company actually needs the person to be finishing up their university studies. And then also they need to be located in the country because they actually get part of the salary compensated by the government. It's a government program, so some internships are actually structured that way. So it can be just simply not possible for a company to actually take people remotely because it's a
Yeah,
government requirement. So I'm not
that
speaking
makes
on,
sense.
you know, a rare situation, but just for other
Yeah,
people that
for
are
sure.
checking out the stream, that is the case for some other internships. And
Yeah, that's interesting to know.
yeah, I guess two follow-up questions as well with
Mm.
internships is basically asking like for people that are coming in from, say, you know, like linear sound design, like what kind of you know, sort of skills are you looking at from somebody that doesn't necessarily have like game audio sound design skills, but they have linear sound
Mm.
design skills? Like what kind of things are you looking for there, and what would you suggest in, you know, maybe not for the internship, but maybe just for roles in general, how they might want to bridge that gap between working in linear to working with games for sound design?
Sure, yeah. Honestly, for sound design, I would say it's really transferable.
Hmm.
I would say less so for music because sometimes when you're writing interactive music, the nature of doing that, particularly for how we've done it in Sea of Thieves, which is largely more procedural, a lot of things are done in snippets. So we have essentially, for those who don't really know about Wise, it may not make as much sense, but in Wise, the middleware software we use, we have random containers of lots of short snippets of sounds. And a lot of the music is actually built out of the randomization of those parts playing on top of each other. So I think that can sometimes be a bit counterintuitive for a composer to then write in that form because it's although you still kind of loosely compose it in a linear format, the way that we implement it and play it in game is not really linear in that sense. But for sound design, ultimately it's whether you're doing linear or whether you're working on games, you're still just creating sounds. So whether you're creating a whole timeline of sounds in a linear piece or a video or a trailer or whatever you're working on, it's no different really. You're still creating those individual sounds and that individual mix. I suppose for the implementation side, it's different if you haven't got any implementation experience because you've only worked on linear media. That would be the area that I would say to go and look at and to learn. If you're applying for an internship, obviously we're much more forgiving in terms of your middleware knowledge. A lot of
Yeah.
that we end up just teaching you, although a lot of applicants do kind of already at least know some basics or they've gone through sort of either Wise certification or just through the Wise documentation and stuff like that, which is all really nice to see. But we are still, you know, we'll teach you that stuff while you're with us as well. But in terms of applying for maybe so not so much a junior role even, but especially a mid-level role, you would have that expectation to have that middleware understanding, either at least for Wise or for whatever Fmod or whatever they use. But I feel like learning Wise gives you a good foundation that's transferable across most other sort of middleware. I I'd imagine that any company that uses their own middleware software, like sort of bespoke, would be, a bit more. Obviously, they'll teach you that when you're there in terms of the ropes of their software, but the actual logic of implementation you would still already need to know. So yeah, I feel like crossing that over, implementation would be the main thing to look at, and there's so many great resources online. Wise has great documentation, so does Fmod. There's so many tutorials, YouTube, various articles. There's a wealth of information out there to kind of learn what you need to know. And when I applied for my role, I'd already learned sort of the basics of Wise to at least, know what a random container is and how to trigger an event and things, those kind of very, very initial basics with it. And yeah, I've kind of just continued to learn since then. So yeah, but in terms of your actual sound design skill, it's if you're polishing your sound design skill and training your sound design skill, that's going to be transferable. The only real big difference is using middleware and sort of the more technical side of it. I would say. Hopefully that
Yeah.
answers the question.
No, definitely. And I would say that, there's the WISE 101, there's the 251 and 201 and 301. And those are kind of
Yeah,
things that, we use as resources also when we're teaching folks with the school. For people that are just sort of getting their feet wet, there's a new sort of community that's sprung up, the Air Wiggles site, which, has a lot of great new energy behind it, which is really super cool to see. Seeing as right as we're recording this, Twitter is kind of having a little bit of a hiccup slash misstep or
yeah,
stumbling or whatever you want to call it. So there's lots of different great places. Like obviously there's many YouTube channels and stuff like that to check out. There's Discord channels. But yeah, there's sort of the hashtag game audio, which has been around for a long time, which is kind of a community there. But I think if you just sort of dig into things, we also have a Discord for the school too, that people can check out. And in general, people within the game audio community are very inviting to answer questions, to make, for people that are curious of making that sort of like leap from linear audio over into interactive audio. Um,
definitely. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
so I often have people sort of reach out via email just to ask questions, and I did the same when I was starting out. I would just reach out to someone that I thought might be willing to share some information, and there was several people that I spoke to that were just amazing. They were just so supportive. They answered all the questions I had, and that really helped just not only give me the knowledge but just the confidence as well. That really helped. So I always am willing to pay that forwards. If anyone has questions, they can always contact me directly, and I'm happy to do what I can to answer them, to give portfolio feedback or whatever's necessary. So
no, that's great. Let's see here. Just looking at the questions on the YouTube. A question from Jonah is, what does your life work balance look like?
good. Yeah,
Nice.
it's yeah, as simply as you can put it, it's good. Yeah, I'm really fortunate that I have a really good work-life balance with Rare, and yeah, that's kind of it really. It's a healthy
Yeah.
work-life balance. They're really good with giving me flexibility. If I need a medical appointment or anything like that, they're really flexible and supportive with that kind of stuff. And they were even during my internship as well, which is great. There's never an expectation to do more hours than you require. As with any company, if we're going through a slightly busier time, then maybe I'm personally willing to put in a little bit more time if I need to, but the expectation is never there, and that's the important thing. If I want to put in a bit of extra time to polish something, then that's up to me. It's a personal choice. But it's never frequent and it's never a requirement, like I say. So the nicest thing about it has also just been how we've handled sort of remote working throughout the pandemic. As soon as it looked like a lockdown was going to happen, Rare were immediately there making sure that we all had our kit dispatched out to our homes,
Wow.
that I had everything that I needed in terms of being able to do my job from home. And my team were all really supportive with that as well. And we still maintain a hybrid work style to this point. So I might go in a couple of times a week and then I might work from home for a bit. There's no expectation for me to go in every day. If I want to work from home full time, I can. But the important thing is that the choice is all down to the individual, which is really nice. So they've kind of been flexible with that kind of thing all the way through. So
Yeah, and I guess the thing is that like I started in the industry like in the mid 90s, and we had more of a culture of, yeah, the whole, hero, like death march, crunch kind of thing. And yeah,
sure,
it
yeah.
sounds like that's definitely not the case with Rare, which is nice to hear. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I think that mentality still exists in some places, and I think it's also project permitting. Some projects, if they need a bit of TLC, then I think that that kind of culture can then sometimes manifest around that. But at least in my experience with Rare, it's we've never had any instances of that. It's always been kind of well managed, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, there was a question asking basically like, how could you try to sort of check out if companies have that kind of culture or not? And I don't know, what would
Yeah,
be
it's
your response there?
That it is a tricky one because
Yeah.
honestly, I think with anything culture related, you can never really know until you get to a company. My biggest thing would be just transparency in your interviews. Ask that question, like ask, and I think if there's any red flags or difficulty around them answering that question, that will already kind of confirm any suspicions that you might have. I think sometimes you can potentially reach out to people that have maybe worked there in the past if you know them, to ask for their honest opinion about it. But if there's not anyone that has any relations with the company that you're applying for, then I think if you get to the interview stage, that's kind of the only real time that you can have those conversations. And quite simply just saying, do you have a culture around crunch? What's your opinion of working overtime? Is there an expectation for me to do overtime? Those kind of questions are all really important. And like I say, if they try and dodge those questions or not really give an honest answer, then that will already kind of be a red flag for you. But say they're completely honest about it, then that's you have an honest conversation around it, which is also good. But if you are in a situation where they've then lied about it and you get through that interview stage and you go and work for them and you see that that's not the case, um, I know it's difficult, but you're still well within your right to leave the company and go somewhere else. It's never an easy decision to make, but don't ever feel like that you have to stay with the company just because you've gone through that interview process and you think, oh, they've hired me, I don't want to give a bad impression. Ultimately, you come first, your health comes first, your
Yeah.
well-being comes first. And if you don't feel supported, or you don't feel like you're in a good culture, then just get out of there. That's kind of the main takeaway is always put yourself first, ultimately.
Exactly. Now, those are very wise words that sometimes when you're in it, it's honestly difficult to follow, because a lot of the
Yeah,
times the culture of crunch is like the what is it, the metaphor of the boiling frog, where it's kind of like, like the temperature goes up and up and up, and when you're in the pot, you don't understand how hot it's getting, and it's hard to know when it gets too hot. So
for
the
sure.
advantage that people have these days is that right now, like, I have never seen this amount of available jobs and postings for, if we want to
Mm,
focus on game audio, specifically on game audio, but then also in games in general. And so you do have a lot more wiggle room than one might have had in the past, where sometimes, like for me, if I had passed on my internship, it could have been pretty difficult for me to find another window. Like, even within a couple of years after that, it's just that there's, even with here in Vancouver, those kind of opportunities at that time didn't come up a lot. So we do at this point. There's just simply the society has changed, the system has changed,
sure,
and
yeah.
just the situation also has changed. So it's nicer to be able to, yeah, like hear that, but then also be able to follow through on it as well, because it's
Absolutely,
I'm just
yeah.
saying that for me, when I have either been in crunch or also know people that are in it, that it's just very, it's a lot of psychological issue. The main thing being is that the company often tries to prey upon our want to be helpful and to be social, and wraps that all into like, well, don't you want to help out your team? Well, if you leave now, you're
Yeah.
really hurting the team and letting everybody down. But yeah, if
Mm.
it's hurting you, then yeah, it's just time to step out. So that's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just
definitely much harder to handle when the culture of it is it's around you, right? It immerses you, or if everyone on the team kind of normalizes it, then how do you then be the black sheep, if you will, that then kind of tries to go against the grain or kind of change that culture, you know? I think it is difficult, and I don't know if there's necessarily like a clear-cut answer for it. Every company is different, every culture is different, and how we navigate those different scenarios is always going to be different. And it's also different for each individual, you know, for someone that's much more introverted, it's going to be much harder for them to deal with that kind of situation than someone that's maybe a bit more extroverted and is willing to kind of be a bit more outspoken about their opinions or about their values with that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's definitely easier to walk away at the beginning if you get into a new role and you find that things don't feel right. It's, you know, it's much easier to walk away in those situations. But if it's something that creeps up over a period of years when you've worked with the same company or the same project, it definitely is harder. But I think nowadays people are waking up to it. They are becoming much more aware of the kind of you know, the negative side effects and impacts of crunch. And I'd like to think that companies will kind of continue to address it. There seems to be a much more negative sentiment around it, not just
yeah,
within the games industry itself, but also externally. People looking in and are saying that's not okay. Like we don't, you know, even players, like they would often much rather have a deadline postponed than have the devs completely burned out. You know,
yes,
it's I think hopefully companies are kind of becoming more aware of that and are going to address it more going forwards. Ultimately, it just needs to be a culture shift for the entire industry, and every individual company has kind of a responsibility to set a good example and to kind of look after their workers. So hopefully, yeah, it becomes less and less of an occurrence. So.
yeah, no, that's great. It's a very kind of like nuanced answer, and I guess I'll just also underline that it's good to do your research before. Try to, one avenue is to use LinkedIn, or if you're on other social media, to try to connect, either friends of friends or contacts of peers, and see if you can get a vibe sort of externally that way about a company beforehand, and see sort of, like what kind of basically like do your research, even for a company just in general. I think it's good to do that too, to try to find
True.
out sort of where the match between like where you're at and what your skills are and what the company is that you're looking at. Because sometimes people look at a company and they're like, oh yeah, I totally want to work there, and then when one finds out more details, it's just like, well, actually, I should have spent more time looking as well. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
good to do your
absolutely.
research where you can. Um, yeah, and it's tricky. I think to also to build your network, that in-person events, now that the the pandemic times are maybe waning, that it's good to meet up
Yeah,
in person when you can. So there's like different meetups that you can find at meetup.com. There's events like large events like, the Game Developer Conference is kind of the global one, but then there's like, ones that are local, especially I've heard of several in the UK. Obviously, there's ones here in Vancouver, Montreal, San Francisco, sort of like gaming hubs. It's sort of easier. But then also like online with Discord and sort of distributed communities is also possible too, to sort of like build your network. Because sometimes it is nice to connect with people online, but then when you connect with people like in person, it's definitely for me a totally different vibe. So yeah,
yeah, yeah. I would agree. I did that a lot when I was starting out, kind of going to meetups and just a lot of it was kind of just meeting other people in the same situation as me, starting out and stuff. And that was just a really nice support network to kind of just yeah, just chat, just kind of learn from each other's experiences, give feedback to each other if you know people ask for it, sort of on their portfolios and things like that. It was just a really nice community around that, and I did that sort of maybe even once a month or so back then, kind of just going to meet up, and they just you know a lot of them still are just my friends in the industry to this day, which is really nice. So I definitely recommend it where possible.
Yeah, we've definitely got like I think a general like good vibe within game audio these days. Back, years and years ago, it was definitely more of the, boys kind of
Yeah,
vibe where you had just, you know, very sharp shoulders, people keeping other people out
yeah,
and of being afraid for their positions and stuff. And it's basically totally flipped since then to being very open and yeah, allowing people to share their knowledge, like like yourself, not being afraid like, oh, if I tell people like the actual information, then they're going to steal my job. It's just like, well, no. you know
yeah.
that
Absolutely. I think it's yeah, there can be a bit of safeguarding around that from people sometimes. But I mean, even sort of 5 years ago, it was for me going to meetups, it was I was probably still the only woman in the room, you know.
yeah,
It was very common for that to be the case. But even that seems to be changing a lot, which is really nice. Like more recent ones that I'll go to, like there's the gender divide is definitely healthier, should we say, you know, or at least more diverse, you know. So it's really nice to see. And I think the more people that we get into the industry that are representing sort of more diverse backgrounds, hopefully the more that'll inspire people that are from those more diverse backgrounds to also get into the industry. It's kind of a self-fulfilling cycle, right? If you see someone that you resonate with or that you what's the words like identify with, like
yeah,
that gives you so much more confidence to then you know follow the same path. So yeah, I definitely had that where kind of a lot of my inspiration, a lot of the people I was meeting were all guys, and like I got so much support. I was thankfully never judged, never received any kind of negative sentiment around that.
hmm
Everyone was always super welcoming, and I know not everyone's so fortunate to kind of experience that. But I would like to think that attitudes are also changing around that, and that we are becoming a lot more inclusive as an industry as well. I'd like to see that continue to kind of grow in a positive way. So
yeah. That is a key reason why I created the school back around 10 years ago, was this
yeah.
idea of diversity of not only like gender identity, also to do with like location and culture, to do
Mhm.
with one's background, like cultural background, because I believe that not only is it nice to share, this thing that is amazing to work within games, but to me, I want to see and hear games that are different. And I truly believe that if we have different people working on games, then they will naturally produce games that are different and are more diverse. And I think, from an artistic background, just simply more like, the more artistic and like, engaging styles and ideas that I find like really interesting. I really want to continue to support the idea and just the neat things that come out of like just having different people work together. I really honestly I
Yeah.
live for that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so valuable, and it's always again been like that at Rare. We have a really diverse team, sort of in our audio team, and even in terms of sort of seniority. When I joined as an audio intern, my opinion was never less just because I was an intern or because I was so new or I had such limited experience. It was always my opinion was valued just as highly as everyone else's. Um, and my boss has always been much of that attitude that, you know, the fresh blood, if we will, that we bring into the industry, like their opinion is so important, and kind of raising that up, giving them the platform that they need to have their voice heard. That's always really important, because yeah, it's you're not kind of any better or kind of just because you've got more experience or more time in the industry. You know, everyone's opinion is so important, and kind of having, like you say, a diversity in those opinions is just yeah, that's what helps kind of yeah, just broaden and kind of enrich the industry in general. So
Yeah, and we're with the school. We're working with the Game Audio Diversity Alliance, or GADA,
no,
as
that's cool.
a nonprofit to try to help bring in more diverse people. So basically, obviously, there's I guess one way of phrasing it is kind of like non-dudes. So we're looking at
Yeah.
just sort of balancing it. So there's more people like yourself and also people from different parts of the world as well. And so we're just slowly getting that started and working with them. And I believe that they're coming into another round that they're looking for donations and whatnot. So you can check them out, Game Audio Diversity Alliance online. And yeah, it's been exciting to work with scholars there because they basically get their, attendance with the school. They get help out with that, but then they also have not only myself, but then also the Game Audio Diversity Alliance mentors to help them out along the way too. Because a lot of the times when bringing in people that are diverse, there's also additional challenges that can happen too, and it's nice to have that support that some people are simply just needing a little bit more help to to get over the hump kind of thing, as we all do.
Cool.
But it's nice to be able to help build networks that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as more questions for junior roles and around that, how much middleware knowledge would they want to have?
I think it depends on the company. I think at least for us, if for an intern, as I say, we don't emphasize it as much. If we were to take on a junior, and I can only again speak from kind of my opinion, without kind of the rest of my team being here to kind of speak for themselves, but we would we would at least look for someone to have learned what it's possible to learn kind of with online resources, like we wouldn't necessarily expect you to come in and be an expert in using middleware. Of course not. None of us are. We're always learning. I'm always learning as well, So, but at least the kinds of things that I taught myself when I applied for my internship was just what was available on the Audio Kinetic website, kind of going through their documentation, their tutorial videos, learning how to kind of set up my own kind of project, implementing my own sounds. They have some great examples that you can also pair with Unreal as well. So you can actually implement audio that you can then listen to in the engine, which is really cool. So that kind of general flow of at least understanding the basics of how Wise works, what functionality it offers, the different containers, what they're used for, at least the basics of what an RTPC is, for example, like real-time parameter controls if you haven't used them before. But kind of you can learn all of that on their website and with their documentation. So I would at least have an expectation for someone to have gone and done that because it's so accessible to do that,
Yeah.
and to have kind of at least dipped their toe in the water with that stuff. Because yeah, like I say, ultimately when it's possible to teach that to yourself, so I don't see why you wouldn't, even if a company hired you and didn't need that experience. If you need that experience to then do the job that they hire you for, I don't see any harm in learning it before you apply, if that makes sense.
Totally.
So that's kind of the thing is, for me, I was just keen to learn everything that I could, about kind of my areas of interest. And then at the point at which I kind of hit a bit of a brick wall and I was like, well, what I need now is just actual games experience, beyond kind of the game jams and the small projects I've worked on. I needed to kind of keep building on that game experience. So that was the point at which it was like, okay, it's then what you learn on an internship or a junior role, for example. So yeah, like I say, for an intern, it's more about bringing on someone that's just there to learn. For a junior role, we're bringing you on with the expectation of at least being able to do the job. So anything that you can teach yourself about the job that you're applying for before you apply for it is obviously going to be useful for you. So yeah, there's a ton of good resources online. So I would definitely at least explore those, and kind of whether you go through the Wise certifications, that's up to you. But at least kind of the online resources and documentation, tutorial videos, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and some people find it a little bit confusing because it's like, why is certification 101 and then there's a price associated with it, but you can do the
Yeah,
whole thing for free. So just letting you know that, you don't need to pay to become certified, to do the WISE courses. And then similarly through FMOD, they have tutorials that they're, basically sort of upgrading over time. Hopefully there'll be a new sort of pass of those within the next year or so. And what we tend to do at the school, which is paid, is that we help people that hopefully similarly, you've already finished those tutorials, like the WISE, 101, maybe even the 201. And then we just help you sort of refine your skills before you apply to, to roles as well. So you can definitely learn all the game audio stuff on your own, basically for free. And the tools that you need, you just need a laptop. It's good to have a portable recorder. It's good to be familiar in a DAW. These days, the cool kid on the block is Reaper DAW. So if you don't know Reaper DAW, you might want to check that out. But overall, the underline is that you want to have a really good ear, good sound design skills, and if you're working on the technical side, just basically a good I guess a sort of a logical mindset, which is something that I guess we haven't talked about yet. So I guess I'm curious
Mm.
about, like you say, that you're doing more implementation, more technical coding work. Yeah, I'm curious about like sort of how you're learning that on the job and sort of what the details are that with your current role.
Yeah. Um, so I feel like it's different for every company because in Rare we've always been really hands-on with our own implementation. At least from people that I've met that work at some other companies, they're purely creative, so they'll create their sounds and then hand them over to an individual or a team that then kind of implement and do that side of things. So they're kind of kept purely creative. Whereas for Rare, we've always been about owning the whole workflow.
Nice.
So kind of whether it's recording or sort of creating our own sounds, whatever we do, but then again putting them into Wise, and then also the Unreal, we use Unreal Engine for Sea of Thieves, so then also the asset side of that. If we're hooking stuff up, be it in a blueprint or a data asset or anything like that, we're part of that whole workflow. And I've always loved that. I've always loved that kind of empowering feeling of like not only just creating the sounds, but being able to take them through to the point at which I hear them in the game. But I found that I was still hitting a blocker where it needed code support. And there's some stuff that, due to the nature of obviously Sea of Thieves being a AAA project that's been going for several years, there's some stuff that, we reuse certain systems functionality, so I can just go ahead and do it. But when we're creating a new feature that doesn't have code hooks or code support, obviously that needs to be done, and I was kind of hitting that point where it's then okay, I've got to hand this over to an engineer now, and then kind of just sit and kind of wait for it to then be audible in the game. And I always just really hated then having to kind of let go at that part of the process. And
Uh,
I've always kind of been interested in programming, so it was one of those things that I kind of done really basic HTML and sort of CSS, putting together like little website bits and stuff. But I loved sort of the logic of programming, and I just love learning in general. I love learning how things work. So um, it was definitely jumping in the deep end, because when you say to a lot of people that kind of the first real language that you're getting to grips with is C++, they always kind of look at you a bit like, are you crazy? Because obviously it's a difficult language.
yeah.
But I've got a great support network at Rare. As I said, the engineers that we have at Rare are all so supportive. I pester them with questions all the time. But not only that, our audio director, John Vincent, he also does quite a lot of programming, and a lot of the audio systems that we have in Sea of Thieves are thanks to him and kind
Wow.
of his work. So that's always been inspiring. Like, he's part of our team. I see how much it empowers him to just be able to go and do that. So that's really cool. Everything that we did around the playable shanties that we have in the game, that was all off of John's work. So yeah, that was just from the moment I joined as an intern. I was just like, that's so cool that you can do that, and that kind of really inspired me to do that. And because he knows how valuable that is to be able to do, he was obviously totally supportive of being like, this, I want to empower you to do this. Like, absolutely, the more kind of tools that you can add to your tool belt, the better. And I kind of really want to be able to bridge that gap between our audio team and the rest of our engineers as well, because ultimately so much stuff needs engineering, and Sea of Thieves is not just audio. So if I can not only do a bit of that code support, but I think it's also important to bring the audio experience to it as well, because you do sometimes find that if an engineer doesn't necessarily know the true context or the full context of what you need from the audio side. I think sometimes things might get lost in translation,
Yeah.
in terms of they might implement something code wise and you're like, oh, actually I needed this, or I needed the audio to be able to do that, or even something simple like I didn't want it to be a one shot, it needs to be a loop, so I need support for a play event and a stop event, those kind of things. Sometimes something like that might get lost in translation. So for me to be able to then go and kind of do that and know exactly how it needs to function, that just really helps. And to kind of have even just the audio experience in terms of, I know best practices in terms of how we like to code audio in general and Sea of Thieves. There's certain things that we do with how we spawn wise emitters and how we destroy them afterwards, or situations where we might use a detached emitter, which is an emitter that kind of creates itself to play the sound and then gets destroyed afterwards, rather than an emitter that lives there forever. Those kind of things are all considerations that you have to make. So to be able to kind of bridge those two and be able to kind of follow that whole process, I love being able to do that. So the more I can kind of learn in that area, the better, really. So
Yeah, no, I can tell by your response, which is awesome. I really I really appreciate it because honestly, it's one thing to tell people that code will empower you, to be able to basically realize, to me, I see it as a continuum. It's like code is within the continuum, but a lot of people are like, oh, code is scary. And it's just like, to me, like you say, it's when you love learning, you just see that it's all part of the same thing. The ability to really control and have that power over the full amount of your, basically like, creative, like interest in what you want to see and hear in the game is really,
sure,
really
yeah.
important. And yeah, it's you know to me, I know on the flip side that, I similarly tell students, it's like, if you're not interested in programming, that's totally fine. You can still work in game audio, you can work in creative roles, and you can do a lot of, like implementation stuff that is not to do with, say, C++ or C sharp, or, whatever other sort of scripting or coding is in the game. But
Mm.
if you are interested in coding, quite honestly, if you have like sound design skills or like compositional skills combined with coding, you will most likely have a job wherever you want. Like, it's that
Mm.
sort of 1-2 punch that you have is hugely valuable. Like, you know, it's really valuable at any company. And so, and also obviously your drive to continue to want to learn more about it is super important too, because that's what games are, is that the technology is constantly changing. And so
Yeah,
it's important to have people that are like literally along for like a ride in the high seas. It is
for sure.
really, like an exciting journey if you want to, be challenged constantly, like every day. So no, I really, your answer is just like awesome. Love it.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely something I always loved about that transition from working on film and linear media to interactive and games and stuff, was just that technical side, learning those systems and kind of, yeah, that definitely brings me the most joy. I love creating sounds, but just the feeling that you get when you actually implement something in code and it works, like that's just that gives me life. So yeah, I really enjoy that kind of process. And I think for anyone, I definitely wouldn't say it's a requirement to learn programming, and I would definitely not put it above learning for someone starting out, for just basically honing your sound design and your composition skills. Ultimately, it's something that I've learned kind of a few years in, because I have a good support network for it. But if I was still trying to get into the industry, I wouldn't want to lose time kind of honing my actual main craft
Yeah.
to learn programming, if that makes sense. I definitely wouldn't want to spend time kind of learning programming and let it detract from building my sound design skill in the first place. So I think it's like, once you kind of have, at least if you're in a role, I feel like that's a really nice time to be learning it, if the company's kind of supportive and accepting of you doing that, because ultimately it's a benefit to them for you to learn it, but it's not kind of taking away from time that you could maybe be building your portfolio if you're starting out, for example, or something like that. But also the nice side is that if you find coding overwhelming, then Blueprint in Unreal Engine is also
Yeah.
really, I wouldn't say accessible, because it's still really confusing when you start out, but more accessible, because it's visual scripting, so people find that kind of much, not necessarily easier, but a bit more kind of easier way to kind of get into the logic of coding. But whatever even if you don't use it in your role, I still find it really useful in terms of just debugging when something goes wrong. So I love not just learning about our audio systems, but if an engineer solves a bug for me, I always put in the extra time to ask them what the bug was, how they debugged it, sort of how they went to solve it, and just kind of learn that, because that all feeds into my learning. And you do find that often, like, oh yeah, we had a bug with something like that sort of a year ago, and
Yep.
the problem was this. And sometimes you find that it's actually a similar issue. So kind of the more things that you learn from that point of view, the more it benefits you in your day to day, even if you're not kind of directly programming. So yeah, just the more knowledge, the better. That's always kind of the ethos that I've had.
Yeah, that's right. The hashtag the more you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we do have more time available, and I hope, are you available for the next 20-ish minutes or so, or are we?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
cool.
Yeah.
Because for people joining us live, like we have officially, around 5 more minutes, but there's plenty of questions to go through, so we'll try to get
Yeah,
through the rest of them and whatnot, and similarly be respective of time and stuff like that.
sure.
So, gosh, let me try and see which question should we go with here. I think the one that's scrolling off the top is for sound design. This might be hard to answer for you, and I might add a little bit. But the question being, for sound designers that are in a remote position, is there how does one with their own home studio sort of improve that so such that they can basically sort of attract clients remotely, I guess.
That's a harder question for me to answer, because it's not a situation that I've had to be in.
Yeah.
I've always worked with Rare, and since going remotely, ultimately I do the majority of my job on headphones while I'm at home, and then when I'm in the studio, then I have more of a studio setup. So yeah, I mean, if you have something to kind of speak on that, Leonard, then feel free.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
would
if
say
if
that
not,
I do work remotely. I'm an audio director for a title called Eco, and I don't really have much of a home studio, but my main thing is that I just, I make the pillow fort to do my recordings, and quite honestly, they work out fine. So I think that if you're careful about like room reflections and hopefully live in a section of the city or if you can record at nighttime or your, roommate slash neighbors aren't too loud, then you can record most things if you're kind of creative about it. So yeah, I've definitely done sort of all sorts of different scenarios for recording stuff like at home, and I think that it's worked
mm,
out fine. And so I can't really similarly answer that question that much either. But I would say that if you put effort into it and you just work with the company, and if there's things that they're looking for that are within reason, then I think you can just work it out over time. I don't think people are expected to have like a full anechoic chamber or like a perfect studio that has like zero like noise floor. I think that basically you can work it out over time. But with your previous answer, where you're saying about the fun thing about code is that I did just encounter that on the game I'm working on, where
right.
there was like this bug that only happened on the server version, and then it had happened a year ago, and then same thing. I just sort of was just like, hey, look at that bug. I'm pretty sure it's the same one.
You'll find
So
your answers. Yeah,
exactly.
that's
So
always really
being
nice when you
engaged
can do
with the way
that.
that sort of bugs are being fixed and working with the engineers and collaborating with the other members on your team is really huge when you're working in games. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, just the general ethos of reaching out when you need help, I think, is quite important as well. If you're stuck on something, maybe talk to someone that's had a hand in a similar system, or that very system that you're working on. I have to do that a lot. Obviously, Sea of Thieves is a huge project, and there's systems in our code base that go back for years. So sometimes you have to be a bit like, oh, okay, do you know who would have worked on that, or who might
Yeah.
know a bit more about it? And kind of like, it's a bit of a detective's game to then try and find sort of the someone with relevant experience. But yeah, reaching out is always a good thing to do. But yeah, I mean, one more thing, I suppose, on the question of the home setup, like
Hmm.
I don't for the individual. I don't know kind of whether they're starting out or whether this is someone that's kind of been working in
They're
the
more
industry for a
established,
while.
yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult because a lot of us haven't ever worked remotely before, but we're now kind of entertaining the fact that it's possible and that a lot of companies are kind of receptive to it, which is really cool. Like for me, if I was to kind of work from home on a kind of a permanent basis, or even kind of what did I want to say? Like not a permanent, but
Like hybrid?
yeah, yeah, not hybrid because that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment.
Oh,
But yeah, like a more permanent basis where I'm not kind of just relying on headphones all the time, I suppose. But if I'm kind of working on mixes and things like that, at the moment, if I need to do a mix, I'll go into the studio. But
yeah.
if I didn't have that option, then I suppose I would just be trying to mimic the setup that I have at the studio. Obviously, room permitting, shape permitting, size permitting, etc. But yeah, just kind of making sure that my space is as representative as possible, soundproof, soft furnishings, those kind of things. Like if they're more established, I'd imagine that's the kind of thing that they've already been looking into already. But yeah, it's if you're starting out, it's kind of just making sure you've got some decent soundproofing, at least getting yourself some decent headphones, making sure your speakers are raised up off of the desk or off of the floor, those kind of things, and that they're centered well and stuff like that. All kind of basic things, but at least for people starting out that might want to work from home and kind of have like a reasonable setup to work from home, like kind of just at least ticking off those initial boxes sort of thing, is always useful.
Yeah, I would say I remember a time that on a previous game that I worked on where we hadn't tested it in surround yet. So another option for when you're sort of, not sure if you need a piece of gear is to rent. So I basically like functionally rented like a surround rig and then I put it in my room, which of course wasn't an optimal space for it, but at least I could, hear the game in surround and test it and spend the time to like, mix it. And then I didn't need that constant setup. So then I basically, I finished with the rental and that was always fine. Same thing with recording gear. Sometimes it's nice to have like a really nice recorder, a really nice mic, and to just spend the however much it is for the day or to record that. Or you can also borrow stuff from friends too, but just putting it in there, that it was a bit of a mental leap. It sounds funny saying it now, but it was a funny thing for me to consider renting gear at that time, because it was like, oh man, it's so expensive, and then I'm not going to be able to keep it. But
Mm.
like when looking back, I was just like, yeah, it was great, because not only did it allow, and also leasing is possible too, like sort of rent to own if you're like, wanting to build up to a bigger system and stuff. So these are kind of like more businessy type things. But yeah, I think renting was big, because the thing that it is nice to have gear, but sometimes there's an overhead with just having stuff that you don't need, that's like in your space for the other 90% of the time. And sometimes it's good to consider just
Mm.
renting that, or like renting out like a studio space and just paying someone else for their studio time. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of options out there, which is really cool.
Yeah. And speaking on, I guess, on the sort of, uh practical side, do you find that you use like more library stuff, or do you try and record a lot of stuff for the games that you're working on?
Yeah, I love to record where possible.
Mhm.
It is more of a limitation working at home. There's only a certain kind of sound palette that I have at home out of all the things that I've kind of tinkered with and tried to record at home. Um, that we definitely have more freedom to do that at work because we have a Foley studio, so we have, lots of little trinkets in there and also just the space to kind of record in there if we need to. So I've definitely done that a lot more in the past. Like one example is we have rum crates that you can carry around in Sea of Thieves. But if you jump or you fall off while you're carrying them, they slowly crack more and more over time, and then eventually the bottles will break, and then the value of them is kind of worthless. So it's on the player to kind of keep them protected and ship them from A to B safely to get kind of the full reward for them. But library-wise, I couldn't really find any glass sounds that really conveyed what I wanted. So many different recordings I went to, but something that kind of conveyed how they cracked over time, something that sounded nice when you had a crate of them all kind of moving together, and also something that sounded like literally a box full of glass, because that's what you end up with when they're all broken. So that I ended up just getting a bunch of the glass bottles that we had in the recycling bin at work and taking them up to the studio and just putting out a big cloth and just all sorts of stuff, like breaking them, putting them in vices with the hammer, like shifting the glass around, stepping on them, just basically anything that would give me the texture that I wanted. And that I don't think I could have actually gotten the sound for those right with just library sounds at the time. And I think the thing for me is that if I need to do something quickly, like my instinct is always to go more for library stuff. If I know roughly how I want it to sound, and I think over time you build a familiarity with the sound library that you have, so you know what you can pull from, what you can manipulate, and what you can maybe work with to get something done. But if I find that I'm kind of stumbling on a sound, if I find that I'm not quite finding the source that I want, or I've tried various different sources and it's not working, if I find that I know how I want it to sound in my head, but I'm not hearing that in kind of the libraries that I'm working with, then that's when I'll try and record, because I think sometimes it's so much quicker to just record something than it is to dig through your sound library trying to find appropriate source for it and kind of bend it to what you want. And especially for something that might be more textural, the
Yeah.
performance that you can get, if you know exactly kind of the flow, the cadence, whatever you want to call it, for how you want something to sound, performing that yourself is always going to be better. You know, if I want a big sound for a nice scroll rolling out, by doing sound, recording a sound for the kind of the pace that I want that to roll out at and that kind of thing is always going to be much quicker than me going through a bunch of paper sounds. And I still might kind of accentuate that then with some additional library sounds, but at least getting the foundation there, the signature of it there, I tend to find is much quicker with recording. So it does depend. I mean, sometimes it's unexpected. You know, I recorded a bunch of stuff when I got sort of some new gear. So I picked up the geophone mic, and so I went around the
Yeah.
house, kind of just recording a bunch of like metallic stuff and kind of vibrational stuff. So one thing I recorded was sort of my standing desk, the mechanism of it, and sort of the tumble dryer, and just things that had a lot of resonance.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to really do much with those recordings, but then once processed, they actually turned out to be perfect for kind of a tonal ambience that I wanted in a new space that we put in Sea of Thieves.
Nice.
So sometimes it's kind of happy accidents. You have a bunch of recordings that you need, and I know I need to do something soon, sort of a new sound, and I know for a fact I recorded basically that exact same sound about years ago, so I'm going to dig through my old recordings and find that. That's kind of, I always take a portable recorder with me wherever I go, and you know, I went away for a Hindu weekend a while ago, and the Airbnb that we stayed at had like this old kind of mechanism on the windows, like a
Yeah.
winding mechanism to bring the windows in and out, and it was so squeaky and just
Yeah.
sounded awesome. So I recorded that, and I know that I'll use it at some point. So it's I have one of the little Roland's R07 recorders. It's tiny, fits in my pocket, and I take that with me with some of the Uzi mics, and yeah,
Yep.
it's a perfect little setup for kind of a quick sound on the go. It's really cool.
Okay, so there's a few things there that are great to sort of
Yeah,
follow up on.
sure.
The thing is that, like, you can't see it, but slightly off screen, I've got the Uzi mics as well. I'm using them right now, and yeah,
Awesome. Yeah,
they're
they're
great. The
great
loam
picture.
microphones, but they're hard to find. So if you can't find them, students have said that the Clippy sort of alternative works out fairly well. Similar kind of price point. But yeah, like I have that plugged into my H1, which is like a Zoom microphone, or sorry, recorder, and I travel with that. That combination tends to work really well for me. I also similarly travel with, I have an H6 Zoom, and I forgot that when I was in Norway, and I'm still waiting to get it back. So when you
Oh
travel with your
no.
gear, make sure to remember just that you got to bring it back with you.
Take it back with you.
So the same thing, like when doing a small trip, there was like a stove, like a wood stove, a wood burning stove, and like the creek opening that was just amazing. Same thing, like there's
So,
something about creeks that are so they evocative, they're very like vocal,
mhm.
and so I was able to use that in the game as well. There was like a furnace that we needed the door opening for, and I'm just like, and the thing that's nice about recording is that when you put those sounds in the game, you listen back to it and you have sort of a double memory of just like, oh, I remember like being like on vacation recording that sound, and then you hear it in the game, and it's just like, oh.
Sure,
So
sure. I had
yeah,
that actually for the we have a thing called the Chest of Rage in Sea of Thieves, which is this big
yeah,
chest that gets really angry, and over time it heats up and then it explodes and kind of sets anything nearby on fire. But that's kind of a mixture of stuff, like not the build up of that is vocal because it's a curse chest that has a little face on that gets angry. So that is actually just a bunch of layers of our audio team all screaming slowly, which was great fun. And every time I hear it, I always think of those recording sessions. but also you get like a nice sizzle when you put it in the water, kind of, like, well, the exact sound that I did was when I was on holiday with my partner and I recorded sort of the hot coals in a sauna. Um,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, just pouring the water over them, that sizzle, I find it such a nice sound. And it was so cool to then use that exact, because that was the exact sound I needed. It's this big hot chest that you then put in the water, and I really
Hmm.
wanted that soothing kind of, it's relaxing now, and kind of all the chest calms down, and it's not angry anymore. So it's this nice like therapeutic sound that you get whenever you're in the sauna and you're putting a bit more water on the coals. Like it was
Yeah.
just perfect for it. So yeah, it always takes me back to being on holiday, which is nice.
Yeah. Angry chest into like nice, calm, meditative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's perfect. Okay, we got a couple more questions left. So for people that are on the YouTube, I'll probably cut the questions off here and just answer the existing ones because we still have ones streaming in. So um, I answered that question. And so I guess there's two more questions left. And then I have a question, which will probably be slightly a little bit longer answer. But do you record most, oh, sorry. What are the scripting languages you recommend to learn, at least at the basic level, to sort of help your employability within games?
Program languages, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does depend. I've so like I say, I've jumped in the deep end with learning C++, plus plus, which I wouldn't. I don't know whether to recommend that or not because I've kind of found it okay, but other people I think really struggle with C++. Plus plus. I've heard that Python's actually kind of much
Yeah,
easier to learn. So I would definitely recommend maybe looking at Python. Ultimately, any language that you learn, it's more about, for me, when you're starting out, building the logic of programming. So that
totally.
logic, the same way when you kind of learn to use, a DAW, like if you learn Pro Tools, the functionality will be different in Pro Tools versus Reaper, but the actual logic of working inside of that software is transferable, if that
Yeah,
makes sense. So,
totally.
yeah, that's for languages I kind of find the same. So yeah, I think I've always been told Python's definitely easier to learn. Some people also learn Java. In terms of C languages, some people go for C sharp before they go for C++. Um, I know that you can do quite a lot of stuff in Unity with using C sharp. I think that's kind of tends to be the main spur for people learning C sharp is working with Unity. But I think it really just depends on what you want to achieve and what your end goal is. So yeah, maybe start with Python, but if ultimately you're interested in becoming a C++ programmer, for example, then just look at C++, look at some tutorials. If it completely goes over your head and you feel really stressed out, then maybe look at Python or at kind of a more accessible language. But you equally might find that you actually get on with it okay, and that with a bit of time that it kind of the puzzle pieces click and that you're fine with it. So I wouldn't rule it out just because people say, "Oh, that language is difficult." I wouldn't kind of rule it out.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if you put in the time and the practice, then you'll learn it. So yeah, I would say just go for it. That's kind of always been my attitude.
No, that's great. No, I would just do a little, whatever plug at the end because I did a presentation on visual scripting recently, and to say that, using blueprints, which is sort of the main way that visual scripting is done as far as like, publicly accessible visual scripting. They also have visual scripting within companies like Gorilla or Electronic Arts as
Mm,
well. So learning Unreal blueprints is helpful for that. And then there's DSP stuff, which looks like visual scripting, which is like meta sounds within Unreal, but learning
mm.
blueprints is really good. And then yes, all the stuff that you've mentioned as far as sort of like, the text-based kind of scripting stuff
Yeah,
is really important to learn. And all these things are transferable between one another. And yeah, when I have, people that approach me that are asking questions like, do I really need to learn this and how do I go about it? A lot of it is just, if a person has a stick with itness, I mean, that's mainly the
mm,
thing is it's like learning another language. And sometimes if you don't see any utility of like, like learning, I don't know, Italian or something, then that's fine. You can still, whatever, continue on. Well, at least for us, like in English, which is fine. But if you
sure.
learn those coding languages, it does give you all that extra power that, you were talking about earlier, which I find similarly very exciting. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's sort of try to find something that matches with you and that you can stick with and sort of chip away with, at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess the final question from the channel, and then I'll ask my final question is, what are your headphones?
Oh, they're focal headphones.
Ah,
Yeah, so thankfully used through work because they're expensive headphones. But yeah, it's kindly provided by Rare for me to do my job with. So yeah, they're Focal Clear Professional, I think they're called. They're great headphones. I've used them throughout the entire time that I've worked from home. And to be honest, I was always a bit worried when I was going to go back to the studio because, as you can see, I've got a shared office with my partner, so I couldn't really work on speakers. I had to work on headphones. And I was always a bit worried of like, oh, well, when I go back into the studio and I can finally listen to the game on my speakers again, is the work that I've done going to sound totally different? But it was actually like pretty transferable. There wasn't anything that I would say I needed to remix or go back and revisit. The headphones have been great. Really clear mix. There's no kind of real bias in any frequencies. A lot of headphones I've tried in the past have too much bias in the mids for me personally, so I kind of struggled with that. But for these, I find them really transparent, which is good, and they're also just really comfortable. Like a big thing with headphones is having comfortable headphones. So yeah, they've been great for that. But yeah, they're not the most entry level headphones. So yeah, there's definitely better options out there. Like if budget is a factor. So
yeah, yeah, that's a tricky one, and that's kind of a deep topic. So I'll say that I use the Sennheiser 650s, and they've worked well for
yeah,
me. They're open ear, and I find that that tends to, for me, open ear headphones tend to similarly translate better to the final mix for speakers because it's just sort of like, yeah, it's that's kind of what you want, I think, out of headphones is like a set of headphones where you can know what it's going to sound like when it goes over the air.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and these are the same as well, open ear. So they've definitely been good for that.
Nice. So my final question for you is that we've had the keyboard there in the background, plus there's the guitar, plus also in
Yeah,
your title, you're listed as a musician. So I want to
yeah.
dig into the whole like we've talked a lot about like sound design and implementation, but then you have part of this title for you that's musician. And how does musician like relate to your current work? And also, I don't know, maybe stuff that you have time to do on the side if you do as well. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so musician's definitely always been my background. And I kind of, it's not with my official title with Rare, my official title senior sound designer, but musician I always like to keep in my bio because it's still a big part of my identity, and I still bring the knowledge of being a musician into my role sometimes, particularly at the start when I was helping Robin with the shanties that we put in the game. Having a little bit of multi-instrumentalist in me was quite useful for kind of learning the hurdy-gurdy and the concertina and all the other kind of weird instruments that we use in Sea of Thieves. So that was good, and just kind of the knowledge that I had of kind of recording instruments and stuff like that was quite relevant for that. But yeah, I'm a guitarist and also a bassist, but primarily a guitarist. I've actually more recently been trying to delve into piano. I can only play little bits on piano, but I've been trying to find some time to actually learn to play better. So yeah, and I play a little bit of drums as well, but again, only to kind of a fairly kind of amateur level. So yeah, I've kind of similar logic or kind of ethos, I suppose, with learning sort
Hmm.
of different technical stuff. I love learning different instruments as well. Um, we have a whole cupboard of weird instruments at Rare, so it's kind of always been fun whenever, particularly when we were working at the studio, kind of before COVID happened, like. Every so often we would get a new delivery of a new instrument, and I'd be in Robin's office like, "Oh, what's that? What's that? Can I have a play? Can we give it?" And we'd sort of give it a try, and just yeah, there's lots of cool little bits that we've got there. But yeah, that was the main foundation of my music degree was playing guitar. So I played in a lot of bands. I did a lot of kind of gigs. I did a fair bit of theatre as well, kind of working in pit bands for theatre shows. And yeah, it's what I did at college as well. Also I did music at college and then music at university. So for a good number of years, the majority of my life was just playing music and kind of playing guitar, which was really cool. So yeah, I don't kind of get as much time for it nowadays, but I do like to try and still make time for it where possible, which is part of the reason why I keep it out, just so it's my prompts to go and play it rather than shutting it away in the cupboard or something.
Exactly. You trip over the guitar cable and it's just like, okay, all right, fine.
Yeah, it's calling
Yeah.
me.
No, that's great. Yeah, I have my when I have spare time, I do music stuff as well, and yeah, I love doing composition and whatnot. So that's
Yeah.
yeah, a great great way to sort of wrap things up here. So I'll say many thanks to our YouTube live audience. This has been great. Katie,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us. My name is Leonard. This is School of Video Game Audio, and this has been Q&A talking about all the great stuff that Katie Tarrant has been doing at Rare. And I guess my final question is, yeah, like, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so as we said earlier, Twitter's kind of imploding a little bit,
Yes.
but I am still on there. All the while it's still alive, I'm still on there. My alias is K Tarrant Audio. So yeah, you can find me on there, and but also via email. My website is just katietarrant.com. I've got a contact form on there where you can reach out to me if you've got any additional questions. That'll just come straight through to my email. Or if you need my email, it's just katie@katietarrant.com. So everything just revolves around my name, so it's fairly transparent. Yeah, LinkedIn as well. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn if you've got any questions. Yeah, they're kind of the main platforms that people tend to reach out with kind of questions and stuff on. So yeah, any of that's fine.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, and
Yeah, thank you as
we'll
well.
cheers. No, it's been great having you join us. And so, yeah, thanks again to everyone, and yeah, till next time. Bye.
See you later. Thanks.